and at home. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Professor Anil, and the organizers of the seminar for giving me an opportunity to present at this conference. Greeting to all the scholars, experts in the fields, guests, students, colleagues, and friends. A very warm greeting to all of you. I came to Lakhisarai first in 2022 when the second phase of excavation was going on, and I saw the Lali Pahari Monastery, and then Anil sir told me to go and see a few villages which has sculptural remains. So I went there, and in one of the villages in Kabaya, there is a temple called Ramlala Mandir, and it has lots of sculptures, life-size sculptures, and what I saw was there are quite big ones which are unfinished, and later on somehow it was in my mind it was the first time I saw and noticed how unfinished sculpture looked. Before that I may have crossed it but didn't notice it, that I could think about it and try to know and learn about the techniques of the sculptors, and I thought it's a good opportunity right now to present this paper here in Lakhisarai. Next slide, please. So why unfinished? Why study unfinished? The unfinished sculptures within Indian art examines not merely an incomplete objects, but it is key to understand sculptural production. While some sculpture fulfill their intended role in concentrated spaces, others remain incomplete due to their varied factors such as interruption in patronage, changes in artistic directions or ritual beliefs, or sometimes faulty iconographic programs. Using examples from the unfinished sculptures at Lakhisarai, a temple shrine, I will examine how these sculptures illuminate aspects of sculptural technique, workshop practices, and artistic productions. Unfinished sculptures are not unique to Lakhisarai. They appear all across various sites in India, yet often they have been overlooked in art historical discourses. These works, halted at different stages of completion, reveal insight into the practices of sculptural production. It challenges traditional view of completeness, proposing that unfinished works can carry intended meanings. So we will look at how these sculptures create a dialogue between form, function, and viewers. If studied carefully, unfinished sculptures can sometimes provide clearer evidence of stone workshop sites, like at Krimila, ateliers, guilds, and their method of working with stones. This helps us understand how workshops were structured, division of labor was carried out, and the collective process of producing large-scale workshops. Next slide, please. So stone carving is controlled by a series of factors. First, it is the responsiveness of the stone to whether it's hard or soft, where it's grainy or it splits naturally. Its workability, the ability to take polish and specifically how much it can take detail, from which direction a carver should enter, which tool to use, and over the period of time they develop communication with the stone. So where does it start from? So it starts from this big bowl of stones that we see in our surroundings, in our geography, and so the carvers, they also needed to know which stone to choose, what was the right stone, whether it's too old or too young, and depending on that they would use this. Indian carvers use this method to extract stones from the much larger boulders, and they would sometimes use wooden wedges or metal wedges, and they would make small hole in a big rock, and then it was one of the techniques to split stones, as you can see those small rectangular holes, and then above you can see a split stone boulder. So it starts from there, and stone carving involves taking away material from original masses. So the process is very subtractive, and subtractive thinking requires the worker to keep in mind that once the original mass is taken off, it cannot be put back together, and so it means that you need careful planning beforehand. And in Indian system of stone carving, we have from textual references, we have tools and ways of how stone guidebooks or tools which were which were used by the carvers and the guilds. Next slide. The panjara is one of the tools which was used by the stone carvers, and it is still used in Nepal in 18th, 19th centuries. They used it, and so you see it gives a grid kind of a setup, and it shows which whether you have to go. There are lines and grids along which you need to carve and chisel. So you pre-think or you plan it beforehand, you envision beforehand before taking a chisel and making a mark on a stone. And there are lots of texts around it. Maya Mata of 10th century, Mool Sarvastivad Vinaya talks about it. Shilp Sastra talks about it. Next slide. Stone carving across the world involves percussion tools, axes with pointed edges, and metal hammers were used to strike. Here we have a birhut panel of stone carvers working on a stone, and there are some stone tools and chisels from Malappuram. Next slide, please. So at Lakhisarai, when I visited, I saw quite a few iron tools lying around, and I think some of it can be also pointed chisel tools for stone carving. And so yeah, the small ones are nails, but then these are pointed. It also looks like nail, but it can also be used for chiseling. Okay, next slide. And then you have different type of tools that you can see mark on the sculptures. There are point axe marks on the back of the sculptural slabs, and then you have pointed chisel mark, which is not so rough and very it is used at the end when the sculpture is about to finish. It's smoother mark. Next please. So there are intentional unfinished part in sculptures, like the back of the sculpture. Sometimes it is unfinished, but sometimes you can see it is smoothened when you have an inscription to show at the back. Next slide please. Then unfinished parts like lingas, where you have to, because the base of the linga goes underneath the ground, and only the upper part is visible to the preacher. So the Vishnu Bhanga and the Brahma Bhanga is underneath, and so it remains unfinished. So these are the intentional unfinished sculptures or sculptural parts that I am pointing out to. Next slide. So let us see, and yeah, there are a few examples of more intentional unfinished parts in sculptures. Next please. So coming to Lakhisarai, this is Ramlala Jora Mandir. in Kabaya, and this is a cookie cutting cutter technique, uh, which is not, of course, it's a Western technique that we implement when we try to understand how the stones were cut. And Vidya Dehejia has worked a lot in identifying few of the techniques which are very similar in Indian context. So cookie cutter is one of the techniques that stonemasons use in India. And in this technique, the sculptor starts with a block of stone that has been prepared by being squared to the shape required for the finished sculptures. And on its face, the carver draws and incisors the line out, and figures is planned in a rough relief is created. And it is not an advanced stage, it is just a block cutting method, but still you can see and understand the iconography of who this deity can be. Yesterday Picron also spoke about this one, and she said it's a crown Buddha, which is correct. Can I move to the next slide? So you can see how there's mark of delineations within the sculpture composition. You can see how the crown is delineated at first, and how you can see the knees, which will be later on becomes to imbue realism in a sculpture. They have carved it, incised it initially in a very preliminary phase. Next slide. There's another sculpture from Lakhisarai, which was kept in the museum, and it's a niche where a sun goddess, unfinished sun goddess, and the carvers, they worked across the entire area, both the niches and the figure at the same time, suggesting that the niche was an important part of the sculptural undertaking. And although they began finishing the figure before the niche was fully squared, and you can see the tool marks around the sculptures, and you can see the detail of the chiseling on the face. These are concentric circles which give desired contour for the face when it was polished, and abrasive was used on the face. Next slide please. In the lower part, you can see the Surya is accompanied by Dandin and Pingal and his charioteer Aruna. Although the form is very raw, but you can, if you know the iconographic program, you can come to a conclusion, because Pingal is a pot-bellied attendant who holds ink pot, and Dandin has a danda on his hand. Next slide please. This is a very big panel, unfinished panel of a sculpture, which if you remember, Rob talked about this one, so I'm not going into detail of the carving, but one thing that one needs to ask is why these stones are so reflective in nature. What makes the surface so metallic and glossy? Was it some kind of treatment with the stone, or was the technique of polishing, what was the kind of technique or abrasive that was used by the artisans community? And Eastern India has had this kind of luster and polish earlier as well in the modern period. Please, next slide. And so some scholars say that agate burnishers were used for this kind of gloss. And I think, but in context of early medieval period, more work needs to be done on the quality and the nature of the stone and the treatment of stone in the sculptural finding of this region. Next slide please. This seems to be a Tara figure, not quite clear, but based on few things, it cannot be Maitreya, because there's I think I'm confused between, sorry, Manjushri or Tara. Uh, so this is one of the unfinished sculptures from the Ramlala Mandir. Next slide, please. This you see how the stone carvers, it shows a kind of a 3D modeling that is happening, which the carving takes you in a three-dimensional mode and adds depth to a piece of stone, and then you have lines going throughout parallelly across the bodies. So I mean, if you read it more closely, then maybe if you have more data collected on these, we can understand why certain lines go parallel, why certain lines go concentric, because lines on the face are concentric, lines on the legs are parallel to each other. I mean, we need more data to understand how these processes were carried out. Regarding to this deity, she seems Maharshi Tara, based on her Vakhyan Mudra and Raj Leela Asana, and on her head there is enough space that a miniature figure of Amok Siddhi could have been fixed. So it's incomplete, so it's just a speculation that one can make. The stela is absent. The pedestal is yet to be formed, and but still you can see the detail in the pedestal. Next slide, please. Yes, so detail in the pedestal, you can see the lines are running parallel. One of the feet is complete, and the other one is incomplete. Next slide, please. On the corners of the pedestal, you can see the sponsor images, which is roughly carved out, but there are other sponsor images from the same temple where you have other figures. So I think I did a comparative analysis of how they would look. Next slide. So based on the Lakhisarai, Claudine pointed out that this sculpture was from Lakhisarai. I was arguing that it is Maharshi Tara. Next slide. Another unfinished sculpture lies at the temple. It's amongst lot of goddesses that are kept in the temple. The center one is the unfinished Tara. So you can see, next slide, there are varying degrees of incompletion in this image. It's complete, it's there, it's more complete than the previous one, and it's readable, yet it's unfinished in many ways. The stela is not formed, the 5 Buddha is yet to be made, but then one can see that the figures were carved from outside to inside. First the work was done on the image, and later on the background or the flat surface was chiseled and made and perfected. Next slide, please. Just few comparisons of how the hands was perfected. Next slide, please. Yes, I think this is a sculpture from the sculpture on the right is from Vikramshila, and I thought they follow same stylistic style. Yeah, I think this is from Lakhisarai, the Vikramshila one, because as Claudine also pointed out, that in the pedestal they leave enough space at the bottom, which has 4-line inscription. So I think this one is from Krimila. Next slide, please. And then you can see how intricately things were thought of before. As you can see, the grooves are there for the textile to be later on added by maybe the expert in textile making on stones. Next slide. So we see that the artisan guild at Lakhisarai has mastered and controlled the removal mastered and controlled the method of stone carving, and they have controlled the material, understood the material, established a generational communication with the stone, and this relation between the technique, the chosen stone, and the resulting aesthetics, gives few lines that we see on the left, how realistic it becomes. That if you actually see it, becomes very photographic, very realism when you see a deity holding a child in her movement. They mastered realism in some sense. Next slide. Then we further find that there are inscriptions of carvers and stone cutters from Krimila. Professor Anil Kumar has deciphered and was kind enough to share this with me. There is stone cutters. Sutradhar was an artisan or a man who planned or laid out how the stone would be. So we have engraver's name, you have stone cutter's name. So yes, we see a specialized guild here working, like this question of whether there was a workshop or not is not to be questioned, but how many workshops, how many specialized workshop was here, that needs to be looked. And there was interconnectedness between the guilds of all these specialized carvers, sutradhars, technicians, chief architects, shilpins that we call, and who made this site of what we have been talking about for 2-3 days. Thank you. Next.